Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, and in this Short Game Technical video we're going to be tackling tech news which has popped up over the past 24 or so hours. First thing we're going to discuss is Radeon Vega, specifically the Frontier Edition, but also some information on RX Vega. This info is going to really consist of benchmarks, game results, multi-GPU configurations, and a few other bits and pieces. Then we're going to move on to Sony and the PlayStation 5, because the company are telling us that it's not coming anytime soon, despite, of course, numerous analysts now telling us that that's not the case and we will see it by late 2018. But let's begin with the Radeon Vega Frontier Edition and also some info on the RX Vegas as well. So this was originally sent to me by Henrik S, so thanks very much to him. So, the website PC World were actually given an exclusive first look at the Radeon Frontier Edition. Now, just to clarify, this of course is the card aimed at the prosumer, not necessarily the average user, for gaming anyway. But even so, they were given the opportunity to test out a number of applications, including some synthetic benchmarks, including SpecView Perf and Cinebench OpenGL, and also some game-related tests were conducted, but there's a caveat. They were not allowed to benchmark those tests, so they were only allowed to basically eyeball it. So anyway, they ran their games at the monitor's native resolution. We'll get to that in a second. But with synthetic benchmarks, they're looking at 15 to 50% higher performance than Titan XP. Obviously, this does depend upon the benchmark. Now, one of the criticisms a lot of folks, including myself to a degree, has levied towards AMD is the fact that they're comparing it against the Titan XP, not the higher-end Quadros. And according to AMD, this is basically as a like-for-like measure in terms of pricing. So in other words, it's a bang-for-buck thing. I kind of agree with that. It's pretty obvious that AMD, at least with Vega, are not going to be able to keep up with the Volta architecture for high-end computing. So it looks like, you know, the Radeon Frontier Editions are looking pretty good for the price, but obviously they're still considerably more expensive than the gaming-orientated cards. At least we can make that presumption. So I won't read out all the results. You can see a couple of images on screen, but I'll also link to their full thing if you want to in the video description. Unfortunately, for those of us wanting to see games, we're at a bit of a letdown because they only let them play with Doom, Vulkan, Prey, DirectX 11, and Sniper Elite 4. Now, by the way, those are all games that AMD have shown off before. You're probably aware of all of those. We've seen Sniper Elite a couple of times. We've seen Prey a couple of times. I believe we saw it at their last conference, and Doom has been one of the titles they first showed off with Vega, along with Star Wars Battlefront. But anyway, according to PC World, all the games were running at the highest settings with native resolution of the panels. I believe the panel they were using was a wide aspect 3440 by 1440p, and instead they had two systems. One was using a GTX 1080, the other was once again the Radeon Frontier Edition Vega card. And according to them, their estimates is that the cards are faster than the 1080s, but not quite as fast as the 1080 Ti. It's slightly behind. But, as usual, there are caveats here. The first caveat is that, obviously, this is the Frontier Edition, and AMD keep telling us that this is a card which is not necessarily designed for gaming. So, maybe we can get an extra 10 to 20% performance for the RX cards. If that's the case, maybe that's enough to push it to 1080 Ti levels, which we can make at least some level of presumption means that this basically means they're going to be level pegging with Nvidia, which puts us all in a very weird position. Basically, if you've got, let's say, a GTX 1080 and you've paid a pretty decent price for it, then you might be quite happy to not upgrade to Vega. On the other hand, if you've got an older card, for example, let's say you've got, like a 290 or a 290X, and you're waiting on the red train to pull into the station, then you're probably not going to be that disappointed. My only concern is that if Nvidia do release the touted Pascal die shrink, because it looks like, at least according to rumours on Fudzilla, that we're not going to be seeing Volta for the high-end GeForce cards. Instead, we're going to be just seeing a die shrunk version of Pascal, which we can make the presumptions, a couple of presumptions. One, it's going to have a few architecture changes. The second is it's going to have higher clock speeds. Whether either of those two things are true or not, let alone the rumour itself of we're just going to see a die shrunk Pascal, well, your guess is as good as mine. Other than that, Frontier Edition will run in GPU configurations, but it's not designed for that. And basically, they don't want to reveal anything regarding the colours. It will be launched on July 30th, which is at SIGGRAPH. And that's about it. While we're on the subject of Vega, it also seems prudent for me to add in a bit of additional information regarding the power draw. So you might recall that a few days ago I put out a video concerning that Vega needs a lot of power. Now this was supposedly by an individual who works at MSI and was active on the forum. But apparently the translation of this quote, because it once again was a Dutch forum, was not within context. I actually received an email from another individual. All I know is his name is Bas. That's B-A-S, excuse me. And he is Dutch and has provided me a slightly better translation. He says that, be warned, this misses the context. The same person, the source, also pointed out that whether or not the power draw is high depends on what it performs, hinting the performance was rather impressive. So that is just something to bear in mind. It probably does depend on what application it's running. Obviously that still requires a lot of energy in theory, but it might not mean that it's going to just be gobbling up like 300 watt TDP no matter what you're doing, like on the Windows desktop for example. Obviously slight exaggeration, but you get the idea. So, PlayStation 5. Right, well, this one's a bit complex because we all know, of course, the PS4 Pro has been out for about a year now, give or take, and it's doing pretty well in the marketplace, but obviously compared to the Xbox One X, it's just not as powerful. So there were some rumours which popped up from a couple of different sources, but one of the more poignant and perhaps one of the more trustworthy is from Damien Fong, who works at Macquarie Capital Securities. He's an analyst there, and he has told us back about a month and a half ago that the PlayStation 5 will be released before the end of 2018. And he's had a pretty good track record so far, and actually hit the nail on the head on multiple Sony pieces of news. But according to an interview with German website golem.de, the Sony president and CEO Shawn Layden actually believes that this is probably not going to be the case. It's going to be probably some time before they reveal the PlayStation 5, but didn't really go on record as to tell us what that time frame is. He also said that there will never be games which will be available just for the PlayStation 4 Pro. And basically we are just going to see games which are going to be optimized for the PS4 Pro hardware. Of course, some time doesn't really mean much. Like, 18 months is quite some time, really. Personally, I think it's going to depend on a couple of different things. One, how well the new Xbox One X does, or, you know, the artist formerly known as Scorpio, in the marketplace. Like, do developers kind of jump on it immediately? Do Sony feel they're losing sales because of the X? That type of thing. The second is what's going on in terms of technology and pricing. We all know that RAM prices have gone up a lot at the moment, and I have a feeling Microsoft are not happy about that, given the sheer abundance of RAM inside the Xbox One X. RAM prices are going up because so many devices are eating it alive. We've got mobiles, of course, now hitting, 3 gigabytes is like, very standard for a mobile. Many mobiles actually have 6 gigabytes. And then you've got laptops, graphics card with the mining craze, all of this stuff is eating up DRAM. Second thing, regarding technology, what's available? Making the assumption that they're going to stick with AMD, well, we can make at least an educated guess that they're going to have at least Vega available, possibly even Navi. Are we going to see 7nm by that point? Maybe they're going to go to like 10nm? I don't know. I mean, technically next on the roadmap for AMD is 7. But whether they're going to be confident enough for that and whether that's going to hit the time frame of the consoles, I just don't know. And honestly, the other big question is what amount of performance can you get for the amount of dollars that people are willing to spend? For example, with the Xbox One X, yeah, sure, people complain about the CPU inside the Xbox One X, as well as saying, well, it's not quite hitting 4K. But first of all, you can't really mandate on the resolution that developers aim at, because, well, quite honestly, you just can't do it. It just doesn't work. The second thing is that, and this one's probably even more poignant, well, if you're looking at the process thing in terms of pricing, yeah, sure, it's still a custom 8-core processor, which we assume is some derivative of the Jaguar. But some people were saying it's going to be like Ryzen, and I was like, well, maybe it's possible, but it's going to be quite expensive. And obviously it did depend upon the date of Ryzen release for mobile. Honestly, I'm not surprised it didn't end up being Ryzen because of the price. People are already complaining at $500 US. Imagine the sheer number of complaints if it cost more than that. If it costs, let's say, $600 or $700 US. In other words, it's the upper ceiling of how much you can expect your customer to cough up. There are consoles back in the day, though, that did cost more of that, especially if you take into account inflation. But those consoles weren't exactly doing the best in terms of sales figures. So it's kind of like, what do you expect for the amount of money? In a couple of years' time, do we have enough performance, enough hardware power available to run games at a decent resolution and a decent frame rate with a decent jump in quality? For example, if your customers at that point expect 4K and 4K only because the adoption rates of 4K screens have gone through the roof, let's face it, now you can get 4K screens quite cheap, like £300-400 is not unreasonable. Yes, it's not the best 4K screen on earth, but it's still a 4K screen, so it won't be a couple more years before they become increasingly normal in the home. And we have that, along with, we can make a presumption of, decent... Thanks, Windows Defender. That's telling me it's just done an update. Very nice of it. Very helpful. Anyway, yeah, so basically, if they do see 4K as like a very standard thing, and obviously we expect not just an increase in resolution, but we expect a higher frame rate, a more stable frame rate, better quality textures, better quality lighting, better physics, better in-game worlds, larger game worlds, blah, 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 blah. Basically, will the technology at that point, in a year and a half, be that capable? I just don't know. I guess all we can do is wait and see. With all of that said, I'll see you soon. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.